Welcome to another Circle CI partner webinar. On today's session, we're going to talk about how to run effective tests in a microservice environment. Next slide, please. Your co-host for today will be myself. I'm a senior solutions engineer with Circle CI, and then joining me today is Tracy Reagan, the CEO of DeployHub. Hi, Tracy.
Hello, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great to have you. Would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure, so I am the CEO of Deploy Hub. I'm also a board member of the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which has been a really fun ride. I'm also the executive director of an open source project called Ortelius, and I'm a DevOps Institute ambassador. So if you go to any of their skill ups, you might see me there.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy, and looking forward to what you have to teach us about microservices. Quick overview of the agenda. I'm going to start off by giving a very brief introduction to Circle CI and CI/CD in general for anyone who's unfamiliar, and then I'm going to go from there and talk about Circle CI orbs, which are an important pivotal feature of the Circle CI platform that allow us to partner together with vendors and partners like Tracy. From there, I'll segue into giving a brief introduction of DeployHub, and from that point on, I'll hand over the reins to Tracy to talk to us about microservices and how DeployHub and Circle CI can help fix your problems and pain points around this. At any time, if you have any questions, you can feel free to paste them into the chat and use the question feature. However, we will be waiting until the end of the webinar to start addressing those questions directly. If all that sounds good, let's move on. So at Circle CI, our mission is to make it as easy as possible to go from idea to delivery, and we do that by providing a best-in-class CI/CD platform for our users. Next slide, please. Thank you. Founded in 2011, we are now I think we actually hit the 400 employee mark earlier this week. So we're now at 400 employees across 5 continents. We're actually trying to expand to more continents, but there's not great product market fit in Antarctica. So currently, we are the world's largest shared CI/CD platform, and we run across AWS and GCP, and we're doing actually more than 3 million builds per day on our platform. We are framework agnostic. We support all the major cloud providers and platforms as well as operating systems, and subsequently, we can address a huge variety of different use cases. And I'll be going into more detail about that in just a minute. Below here, you can see some logos. Sorry about that. Below here, you can see some logos of some of the companies and brands that trust us to automate their workflows and pipelines and mission critical assets. Thank you. For anyone who's unfamiliar with Circle CI and CI/CD in general, this is a quick diagram. Upstream or to the left, you have your source control, right? Your developers or you are making changes and updates to the product and code base. You're implementing new features, you're fixing bugs, etc. And then you commit and push those commits to the VCS hosting provider. Upon those pushes, Circle CI triggers pipelines. And here in the orchestration section, you can do anything you want. The world is your oyster, right? We have people who are running your simple vanilla unit tests. We've got people doing more complicated testing with integration tests with databases and caches. We've got people doing application security testing. We've got people doing linting and code scanning, what have you. When all of those pipelines are complete and you are confident that the changes that you've made are good and are of good quality, then you can also trigger deployments and deploy scripts with Circle CI. We have customers deploying to all the major cloud providers out there. And again, because of our platform, the way it's architected and how agnostic we are, we can pretty much support most, if not all, use cases. Next slide, please. Just as an example, the way you configure all of these pipelines and workflows and jobs on Circle CI is via the usage of YAML. YAML is very easy to read and understand, and subsequently, it's very quick to onboard, both for you and the rest of your team. All jobs on Circle CI consist of 2 core pieces. The first is the executor, which is the execution environment and the operating system and any other kind of environment settings. And then the other part is the steps or the actual actions you take in this environment. And so seeing the structure, you can see that it's very easy to understand. It's very quick to get up and running and get started. Now, that brings us to another feature called orbs. Okay, we've decided to take this value proposition a step further by using this configuration and making it templatizable, parameterizable, and shareable between multiple groups, teams, and organizations. Next slide, please. One more slide. Thank you. And so again, YAML, the Circle CI orbs are basically just parameterized shareable snippets of the configuration that you just saw before, right? And it is these orbs that allow us to partner together with so many different vendors and companies like Tracy and DeployHub. Next slide, please. To show you a quick example of what this might look like, Circle CI orbs can parameterize many different aspects of your configuration. You can parameterize just individual commands or sequences of steps or scripts that you run in the environment. You can parameterize executors or the execution environment and all of the details around that, or you can parameterize entire jobs that include both the execution environment and the commands you run within them. This kind of templatization and shareability solves two primary use cases. The first is standardization. If you and your teams have common ways that you are doing things, common environments that you are using, common steps, etc., then you can share these between all those projects without having to basically rewrite that config. And that segues into the second value proposition is not having to reinvent the wheel. If you are deploying to, for example, AWS EKS, it's very likely that many other companies are doing the same, so it doesn't make sense that all of you have to rewrite the same exact configuration to do the same thing. And it turns out that you don't have to. We have orbs for that. Next slide, please. In our community today, we have a total of 65 Circle CI maintained orbs, and we've partnered together with more than 80 vendors to write configuration to interface and work with their products and their tools. And in total, the community has more than 2,200 orbs available for you to browse through and potentially make use of in your projects. And so this is another very powerful feature of Circle CI. You have a lot of out-of-the-box functionality that you can make use of immediately. And so next slide, please. And so speaking of those partners, that leads me to one such partner who is here with us today, DeployHub. As the world moves from monolithic services to microservices, you're addressing a variety of problems and issues. However, microservices bring their own complexity, right? When you do domain-driven design in microservices, you often have individual small applications that are shared and used by many other microservices that are in your cluster. And so what this means is that it can be very difficult to keep track of who's using what and what the dependencies are. And so that's one of the pain points that DeployHub solves. It helps you understand the mapping and the relationship between each of these microservices. And Tracy mentioned it earlier, but they do that through the mapping, which they've open sourced, Ortelius. In addition to this, some other problems that you encounter with microservices, right, is that when you've got a big monolithic application, it's very easy to discern what the version is. You make an update to the app, it is now version 1.0.3 if it's a bug fix, etc. But with microservices, you have many small applications with their own versions, and so now your overall application is going to be harder to track. And so again, another pain point that's addressed by DeployHub is mapping the logical application version depending on what changes you've made to different microservices. And then, of course, they also help you track individual versions for all of those microservices and where they're deployed, etc. Next slide. To give you a better understanding of how this works together with Circle CI, you get a change request through whatever project management software you're using. Here we've shown Jira, and so your developers will make the code changes and they'll be code complete, and then you kick off pipelines in Circle CI. You run all your tests, and then you are confident about your changes, and at that point we build Docker containers and then push those Docker containers for your new services or new changes to a registry of some kind. Here we're showing Docker Hub registry. Right? From there, DeployHub works its magic. It establishes the local logical application versions, as I mentioned before. It provides a BOM or bill of materials and shows you what microservices have been impacted by the changes that you just pushed, and then several other pieces of work are done to essentially show you and give you a strong view of everything that's happening within all your services and your cluster. And then finally, I believe DeployHub also does the deployment. Is that the case, Tracy?
Yeah, so we can call things like Helm or Ansible or any external deployment engine's fine with us.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and there you go. So they can also kick off the actual deployment itself.
As
Next
long
slide,
as we
please.
get the feedback so we can track where it's gone to.
Gotcha. Okay. And then all of this ultimately accumulates in a lot of values and business value proposition for Deploy Hub to its customers, right? You can take the guesswork out of tracking, what microservices are being used by what other microservices or who's consuming your microservices. You can reduce redundant coding by making sure that you always keep functionality specific to a microservice. And then you can also confidently deploy and have full visibility into your clusters and your site. And so, having given this short introduction to Deploy Hub, potentially very poorly, I'd like to hand it over to Tracy now, who is the expert who can educate us more on Deploy Hub and microservices.
Well, thank you, and you did it fabulously. I couldn't have
Thank
done
you.
better myself. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the Deploy Hub orb, and I want to preface this with reminding you that the Ortelius open source project, everything we have in the Deploy Hub orb will work with the Ortelius. So something to keep in mind as we kind of move from this monolithic style of CD to microservices is that the goal of one of the I have something I call the three basic truths of microservices. Number two happens to be the fact that they're shared um, and that they're independently deployed. And this means that you could be building out, it's something simple like in this example that we're going to walk through, it's going to be based on a website, a company that builds websites. And they have some foundational microservices that they want all of their websites to use. And then they have different components or microservices for the unique websites. Both have different front ends and both have different ads and recommendations. But they're going to be sharing on the foundation. And this is really how you control microservice sprawl. What you don't want in microservices is to have two full pyramids. You want to have a foundation of microservices that are shared, and then you want the differences. A microservice sprawl is becoming a problem, and that's when you get a pretty nasty hairball that you're trying to untangle. And the concepts of domain-driven design and understanding how to organize microservices will help you here. But we're going to address in this this kind of case study that we have for you how you are able to take if the sign up and login routine was updated or the cart service is updated. How do you know who needs to be executing their test workflows? And that's really what we're going to focus on. So think about this one-to-many relationships that microservices have with what I like to call logical application versions. So remember, in microservices, you really lose the idea of an application because we don't compile and link an entire binary and push it across. We instead have an update to a container, it gets registered, and then we need to do some automated configuration management to figure out who got impacted. And once we know who's impacted, then we know who needs to re-execute their tests. So in this case, what we're showing here is the cart service impacts both of these websites. And that is the trick. So like I said, monolithic pipelines necessarily, even though that they have all of the pieces and parts to them, they're managing the entire puzzle put together. And what you do at CI is important in monolithic because it is where we make the decisions about what's going to be pulled into our binary. And we then create an application version. We know what libraries we're going to pull in. We create the application version. We create the binary. We create a bill of material report. And you take two BOM reports, gives you a difference report. You can see this is exactly what's different. And for testers, a difference report can be pretty critical. And impact reports. What are we impacting? If you're doing really good builds, you have some impact analysis. And then we deploy to dev and we run that, and then we push it on to test. And we push that entire binary with all those work products, the BOM, the diff, and the impact analysis reports to testing so they can do what they need to do. We also have things like contracts. But in a microservice world, that sort of goes away because what we're doing is we are taking our puzzle and we're breaking it down into all these little pieces. And we're turning our static application, and I call it static because we compiled and linked it. We're turning that into a very dynamic application, and that is determined, how it runs is determined at the point in time that you deploy your microservice to the cluster. So we're taking a static application and we break it into smaller pieces and we're having everybody share those pieces. So it becomes a much that's where the complexity comes from in microservices. Creating a microservice isn't necessarily complex. Organizing them, sharing them, and tracking their impact is what's difficult. We were at KubeCon, and in our booth we did a survey, and out of the respondents that we got, we had about 700 people. Um, the numbers were 34% of people said their biggest challenge with microservices were tracking them, tracking their usage. And 34% said understanding their usage. So both the ability to track who's using them and understand how they're put together ended up being far more than 50% of the major problems people have with microservices. And that's because this is what your pipeline is going to look like. You're going to have individual pieces moving across the pipeline. That, we're not creating that application version that we pass to test, and you figure out what you need to test in that application version. Run all your test harness. What you're instead going to have to do is figure out what you need to test and what applications have changed. So every time you have a new microservice moving out, the application that consumes that microservice is a new version. It's like running a build, except we're running it at runtime. And the other complexity is that each of these are going to across different clusters. So we're hearing things like before we were all doing CI/CD and doing things a little more careful, and we still may hear it now once in a while. You hear this thing, they say, well, it worked on my machine. Well, now we hear, well, it worked on my cluster. And when you have those kinds of responses, these are classic configuration management issues. And it's simply because you may not know the version of the microservice with the application version. So how are you impacted with testing? Well, the application schema goes away. So what version are you testing? That's one of the questions you have to ask. A bill of material, which was kind of a standard thing, is how was the application configured and now what's new? Because the bond report gave us the difference report. And then understanding in the microservices world, we have to understand the impact a single microservice may have on multiple applications. These are the core kind of basic understandings that if you wrap your head around as you go down the journey through microservices, if you really wrap your head around taking the CI build process and moving it to runtime, you'll be much farther along in your journey than you realize because you'll see the pitfalls. So again, what we really must start understanding is the logical application, and when a single microservice is updated, which logical applications have been impacted. So we're going to go through how we have set up the orb to solve this problem. I'm going to walk through how we set it up, and then I'm going to show you a demo, and then I'm going to ask for feedback, because what we want to hear from you is what you think of the solution, what your challenges are, and how we can do a better job of solving it. So what we're going to show in today's process is the way that we integrate into Circle CI to track which Circle CI testing workflows you need to execute based on a single microservice update. So we're going to show you how developer commits a code update to the pipeline. And at that point in time, Deploy Hub is going to derive this unique version number for that change. And it takes things like the SHA and the tag in order to do that. We're going to create a new Docker image, and then at that point in time, Deploy Hub is going to create a new component version and subsequently create a new application version for every application that's been impacted. And then we're going to push it to run the testing pipelines. So we talked about orbs and YAML. So let's just see how we're adjusting this. So the first thing you're going to do in your workflow definition is to define to Circle CI what you're considered your baseline. So inside a Deploy Hub, you create what we call a package for your baseline application. And that package says, I'm consuming, for my baseline, I'm consuming these specific microservices. From at that point on, everything is automated based on the baseline. So the first thing you do is you're going to define your component baseline. The second thing that's going to happen is you're going to generate a unique version number for each run of the pipeline. So for example, when this component, to make this component unique for our cart service, we're going to format based on this command, the version and the component version and the Circle CI build number. From there, we're going to create a new component and then a new application. So now we know we have a component. Now we need to go out and find every application that has been impacted. And we do that with our versioning engine. We know what the base version was. We know we have a new version of the a component. And we know every single application that uses that component. So then we go out and we create a new version of the high level application. And in this case, it's the Hipster Store Labor Day sale. Once we do that, then we can deploy all new application versions. We can push out all of those new pieces. Now, we can do it, or you can do it manually, or you can have something else do it. But the point is, we have the new package, and we have all of the automated configuration management data that we need now to start pushing the pipeline with one change going to many. Now, the other thing that we do is we have inside of Deploy Hub, we have something that we track. We have key value pairs that we track. And as part of the Deploy Hub application baseline version, when you define the baseline, you can also define the Circle CI pipeline and which test environments to use for that particular version. So what that gives us is this end result is this one change to a microservice, and we're able to call multiple testing workflows for any application that has been impacted. So we're tracking all of that impact analysis on behalf of Circle CI, passing it up to Circle CI so it knows which testing workflows need to be re-executed based on the update of a single microservice. Now, I've been talking about BOM reports, diff reports, and impact reports. While there are a lot of reports that are created by Deploy Hub, especially like comparison reports across clusters, my three favorite ones are the ability to track a logical application version and know what's in it based on the version of each one of those components. The ability to take one component, one microservice, and see every application that's being impacted, and then take an application version and say what's different between what was running in the application version running in the cluster today and what it was doing last night before I left for work. What happened? What changed? So Ortelius is an open source project. It is about 80% of the code base of Deploy Hub. Everything we covered today is supported in Ortelius, and I'm gonna show you a demo. But you can learn more by going to ortelius.io. And we are also, just like Circle CI, we are hosted. And Deploy Hub team is based on Ortelius, and it is completely free, so you can get started with doing this today. No budget authority required. Okay, I am going to escape out of here. And I am going to run this demo. And this was done by Steve Taylor. It's out. You can find it out on the Deploy Hub YouTube site. It should be probably the most recent upload, so it shouldn't be hard to find. And he's just going to walk through everything that I just walked through on the PowerPoint. And Vinny, you can hear this okay?
So here we're going to make a change to our
Yeah, all good on my end.
Docker file.
Great.
And this Docker file is going to be what's going to trigger our Circle CI job to build our component. So we'll just go ahead and add a comment here. And we'll say core app. We'll save that and go ahead and commit that. And we'll push that out to our Git repo there. So we've pushed our change out to our repository. So we switched over to our Circle CI dashboard, and we can see that our cart service has started here. And this runs for about 5 minutes. So we'll go ahead and take a look at a previous one. And the process that we went through was we did our provisioning of our environment. We did our Docker login. This is where I said we were creating our image tag. This is the step that we grab that information about the component version, the build number, and the short SHA number is where we grab this information to create our image tag, because that image tag was next used in our Docker build. So when we did our build, we tagged it with that image name, and then from there we did our Docker push. So everything up to the Docker push is the standard Docker orb that CircleCI provides. From there, we went and talked to Deploy Hub, and on the Deploy Hub side, we grabbed our component version that we wanted to create, and we went and created that version inside the Deploy Hub database. And when we did that, we associated other information from the build process and CircleCI over to Deploy Hub. This allows us to get back to the git commit. It's been saved, the Docker tag, the SHA, the repositories, all that information has been saved with this component version. So we have that information that we can reference if we need to down the road. So those are the attributes that we updated as part of our Deploy Hub interface here. And next we went and looked to see which application versions were affected by this component update. We found 2 application versions that were updated, and we went and created 2 new versions of those, and we included into those new versions our new cart service. So we'll see that there's going to be a difference between 196 and 195, and that difference being this new cart service that we've updated. After we did that assignment, we did it for the second application version, and we finished that update step with Deploy Hub. Now, the next step that we have is actually deploying the application. In this example, we've included the deployment automatically as part of the workflow. You could leave this step off and do it manually, a manual deployment, but in this case, we've automated the process. One of the things you'll see here, if we scroll back up to the top, Deploy Hub going through and recognizing that there's previous versions of our components are existing in our environments. So in this case, we're looking at QA4 Linux is the environment that we're working with, and we need to deploy our new version of our cart service. And this is where it's actually being deployed out to our Kubernetes cluster. And once that's been completed, we actually are going to trigger another CircleCI pipeline. This pipeline is our testing pipeline that's going to run our Selenium test cases. And in this case, we're running it again against the QA4 Linux environment. Those were going to get kicked off and brought into as a secondary pipeline in our process. So we'll see those pipelines running here in a minute. After that application was deployed, we went and deployed to the QA3 Windows environment, the other version of the application. So we're deploying both to both environments, the different versions of the application. And again, you can see at the very end here where we're triggering the QA3 Windows testing suite to occur there. So let's jump back out to the pipeline view, and we should see that our deployment's pretty far along. Yeah. So our deployment has been completed to QA4, and we've launched the QA4 Linux test suite, and that's been completed. So if we actually dive into that one, this is just the standard Selenium test case suite. And if we look at our test cases here, we'll see that our one test case passed successfully.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, even though he's not here. So again, that can be seen at the on the Deploy Hub site, on the YouTube site. Just search on Deploy Hub on YouTube, and it should be on the first one. I don't know if we share these screens, but there is the link to it. Oops. Present. Okay, and on that, I'd love to get feedback from the folks here. I don't know what this is loading. It should be the QA screen. There we go. And certainly, if you want to reach out and chat with me about problems you might be having or responses on, the solution that we've provided, maybe we need to be adding to it. The Ortelius team, the open source project, is looking forward to getting feedback on how to really build solutions around the testing problem set. So do reach out because we do want to hear your feedback. Your feedback is so critical in defining these solutions, especially this early in microservices. So I'm going to open it up to Q&A or comments. It doesn't have to be questions and answers. It just has to be. It can be comments. What are you seeing? What problems are you facing, and how can we help?
Looks like there's a first question here. It seems to me like this is a tool mostly designed to track versioning rather than testing contracts between services. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. In fact, that's a really great observation, because what in essence we're doing is we're adding the automated configuration management into the process so that you always understand in a microservices environment based on a cluster what version of the application you're running and what version of the microservices that's out there. So with your contract testing, it doesn't really change, but it does. You will find that you'll have things moving faster. The teams will still need to be able to say, yes, we have tested these inputs and outputs, and we believe that it's everything is there and still working and still backward compatible. But what you're going to be challenged with is knowing what application version that you're pushing across. And that's what we're doing. We're not trying to replace anything. We're adding the configuration management so you can track it. And so we can do things automatically, like taking one microservice and going ahead and kicking off multiple test workflows. Contract testing is still going to be important, and it's probably going to become more important. And there's probably ways that we should be integrating with some of those solutions as well.
All right, perfect. I've got an offline external question here. What has been the upper limit of the number of microservices you've seen your tool work with? I guess that's to.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we've scaled components about 10,000 components. We've done our stress testing to. We call them components. They could be a microservice, it could be a Lambda function, it could be a database update, it could be a jar file, it could be anything that you want to make that component. In our stress testing, we've done about 10,000 without having issue. I don't think anybody's pushing 10,000 at a time at this point, but so we're ready.
That's a lot. All right. Any other questions or comments from folks on the call today?
Well, I want to thank everybody who did attend and encourage you to go out and watch that video on YouTube and really look at the details of what we're doing, because it's pretty easy to set up, and because you have the Ortelius version that's free and you're already using Circle CI, this is something you can implement as you face these challenges.
Looks like we have a question from Matthew here. Can you walk through the change set impact test workflow metadata again, linkage in particular?
Okay, so let me go up here. The best image for the metadata, let me be really brave here, and let me jump out.
Oh, are you doing a live demo?
Yes, I'm being very brave, but I think I can answer this question and show this better from it being live than not. So if we look at a component, the metadata that we track on a component, here's that cart service that we were looking at. The metadata we track on the cart service. When we ran this, it came out of this Circle CI build number 178. We grabbed the container registry. We grabbed the digest, and you saw that in the demo that came out. You could see it in the log. We grabbed the tag. We grabbed the git commit. We grabbed the repo that it was coming from. We pull that together to create that version. Now let's go back to components and let's look at the second version. So this is the second one that came across. The second one, now we have 3 different applications that are using it. And we know that, and I'll back to answer that question. For this one, we track that same data. And that's what makes it unique. So that we know that particular component now is new and it's unique, which means that we have to bubble it up to the application level. So remember I talked about a baseline version. Let's take a look at a baseline version because that's kind of that primes the pump. And we do that by building a package. So the developers define their package, and you can see up here it says baseline version. And from there on out, we track things automatically. So if you look at how we did that, we look at the application list. Let's take a look at the Hipster Store 4th of July sale 1.2.9.1. That was one of those that got pushed and tested. We take a look at that. We can see now here's its new BOM report. For this cluster that it was sent to, this is the difference. So remember with microservice, we're not trying to track transactions at the level of the cluster. We're trying to track out the dependencies and the version of the application that's running in all the clusters. So in this case, for this Hipster Store cluster, the difference for the 1.2.9.1 version from the baseline was that GAF7 version of the cart service. And that's what got pushed through the Circle CI pipeline and updated. And also these applications, if we go back to the cart, the component itself, we can see the other applications that would have been impacted. And those were shown in this impact report. So we have a relational database on the back end, and there's a lot of talk about configuration management right now, and GitOps is squarely in this wheelhouse. What we're seeing though is that checking things into Git just may not have enough depth, because if you're managing a microservice and you're trying to manage changes going across and not just trying to constantly manage the state, then you need to have a Git repository that has some depth. It needs to be based on the cluster, the application version, and the component version. So it needs the relational understanding in order to build this map. And this map is what we use to pass off to Circle CI to say now all of these should be retested if they ever get pushed forward. I hope that answered your question.
He said thanks, so I'd assume it did.
Great.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? All right. Let's see here. Does it track question from Matthew again? Let's see here. Does it track tests as well as unit and integration?
Do you mean environments? Can you respond if so yes, it tracks based on the environment you're going to. So you could have a test environment, you could have a unit test environment, you could have an integration environment, you could have as many environments that you need. And oftentimes those environments are different clusters, which therein lies part of the problem, because you could have different versions of one microservice in your integration and a different version in unit testing, and you're probably going to, which means you have different versions of the application. So yes, it does track it. Now, in a shameless plug, even though we've been talking about just the Ortelius pieces, we do in in the Pro version, we do track, we do comparisons so that you can see what's different. So for example, the difference between the baseline and this 1.2.9.1, you can see what changed. This component was changed. You can see that the Circle CI build was 178 and 179 was the new one. And you can see for at the application level, nothing else has changed. So this is, this is a pretty important report because it gives you insights into everything that's different between two application versions. And this is what we lose in a microservices world when we can't compile and link everything in a big binary.
Hmm. This diff looks really useful. This is actually really nice.
Yeah, it's like I say, the graphical reports are easy, they're fast, but this gives the lower level detail and what changed. And we do these diffs between at each level. We do it at the application level, which is what you're seeing now. We can do it at the component level, and we can also diff two clusters. So we can do it at the environment level. So you could say, what's difference between my cluster, the application running in cluster A versus cluster B, because I've got unit testing in A and integration testing in B. What's different? So we do those difference at every what we call object level.
Gotcha. Very cool. It looks like he clarified his question too. It's like I was thinking of tests or test suites, but I think it's answered. I'm guessing that like tracking tests and test suites is not what Deploy Hub is aimed at functionality wise, right?
No, but if it's something that we should be, this is why, I always go back to the open source community. If it's something that should be, and you're interested in, providing us more information about what we should be tracking, because this is a very different world, please, sign up for the Ortelius project, show up to one of the community meetings and give us your feedback and your ideas. We would be happy to add them to the roadmap and kind of do a deep dive in understanding how we might be able to do that. Because we've got the relational database in the back, and there's quite a bit of data that we can add to that and do tracking against.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. Any last comments and questions? All right. Well, it looks like we can go ahead and wrap this up then. Again, the contact information that Tracy showed on the slide earlier, you are able to reach out to her directly via email or by connecting with her on LinkedIn if you'd like. And if you also would prefer, you can also, oops,
Go
I think this
here.
accidentally clicked shared button or something like that. It's okay.
Yeah,
So,
and here's it's the demo, if you want to see it again, is called Effective Testing in Microservice Environment. And you can reach me at Tracy at Deploy Hub. I'm pretty easy to find.
yeah,
And it
and
doesn't really
I
do
believe
anything.
that if you would all like a copy of these slides, then you can always reach out to Circle C at Marketing as well, and we can send over a copy of these slides to you. Thank you all for joining us today on this webinar, and thank you, Tracy, for joining us and teaching us about microservices and all the
Thank you.
complexities that it brings.